Well, howdy everyone, and welcome to season 2 and another episode of the Lauren Muzyka Show, your favorite update in the battle for life, family, and freedom. So excited to have you hanging out with me once again. Again, if we're meeting for the first time, I'm Lauren Muzyka, President and CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life, the nation's largest sidewalk outreach organization, and I'm also an attorney and human rights advocate. Again, so honored to have you with me. As we kick off season 2, I thought we had to start with this foundation. The biggest question for those of us who love the cause of life is, how do you convince someone who is considering abortion to change her mind? Because isn't it true that if we want to save preborn children, we have to understand the heart of an abortion-minded woman and how best to serve her in her perceived crisis, because she's the one making the decision, right? If we don't reach her heart, then abortion doesn't end in that moment and a life isn't saved. If we are people who love life and family, isn't it true that we should care for her just as much as we care about her child's life as well? About 10 years ago, when I launched Sidewalk Advocates for Life, I developed our training around testimony. I had talked to women who had chosen abortion, what it was that moved them towards abortion, women who had chosen life, what it was that helped them to change their minds. I had countless cups of coffee with former abortion workers. And so our training is greatly inspired by that. And then also our lived experience on the sidewalk. So we launched with this, wealth of knowledge, right? But inevitably, people began asking me, Lauren, do you have research to back up what you were doing on the sidewalk? I mean, that's a great question. At the time, I was friends with the president of the Vitae Foundation, who had commissioned the most relevant, up-to-date research on that very topic, the best messaging to a woman considering abortion and what might move her heart to reconsider her decision. And I still remember him saying to me, Lauren, you are literally living out our findings from our right brain research. Remember that. We're going to talk about that, unpack that. Now, the Vitae Foundation has since conducted many more research studies under the leadership of a new president, my dear friend, Brandy Meeks. And she's here today to walk us through what right brain research is, the latest findings relevant to post-Roe versus Wade America, and how you can help a friend or family member to choose life. So this is relevant for everybody. So let me go ahead and introduce our special guest. Brandy Meeks has led in the pro-life movement for well over a decade, first as a pregnancy center director and later as director of marketing and research application at the Vitae Foundation, an organization that facilitates life-saving research and applies the findings to create messaging strategies to share with others in order to make abortion unthinkable. I love that. In 2018, former Planned Parenthood director turned pro-life advocate Abby Johnson asked Brandy to join her as vice president of operations at And Then There Were None abortion worker ministry to help more abortion workers leave the industry. Together, they also launched Pro-Love Ministries, a pro-life organization that seeks to fill gaps in the movement. After Roe v. Wade was overturned, or soon after, Brandy became the president of the Vitae Foundation. She is also a founding board member of the Abortion Survivors Network, continues to assist as a board member at And Then There Were None, serves with the United Nations through the Organization of American States as a CSO to protect human rights internationally, and is also a commissioner with the Missouri Baptist Convention's Christian Life Commission. Let's welcome to the program rock star Brandy Meeks. Hello,
Hi.
Brandy. So great
Hi,
to have you
Lauren.
on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. What an honor it is to be able to join you, especially as you're starting this new season. How great is this?
I know. Thank you for kicking off season 2. I couldn't think of a better person to get us started. So great to have you with us. And I know you're so busy, so thank you again for taking the time. In a couple minutes, I would love for you to share who is Brandy Meeks and how did God lead you to doing what you're doing today?
Well, I appreciate that question because a lot of people think that you must have like this big pro-life story, one that looks like an unexpected pregnancy or you were connected to an abortion in some way to have a voice in this movement. And I'm here to tell you that wasn't necessarily my experience. And so hopefully we can encourage and inspire others that just because you don't have a pro-life story doesn't mean that you can't be involved in this mission, because you absolutely can, and you have the credibility to do so. And we can talk about that more in just a little bit. But for me, I was in church and we had a medical missionary that came and spoke about serving people overseas in the medical mission field. And I was a young teenager, probably 13 or 14, and I went forward that night because I felt a call on my heart that the Lord wanted me to serve in that way. And then I got into high school and I realized I could not stand the sight of blood. I was the kid that had to go out in the hallway while they were dissecting frogs. And I was not very good at biology. It was not a gifting to me. And I thought, I got this wrong, right? Like I was just a young, naive kid that thought I was supposed to go into medical missions, and I messed this up. And so, sorry, God, I actually ended up majoring in psychology, a minor in communications, and, went a completely different path. But when the board of directors called me to offer me a position for the local pregnancy center as the director there, it hit me, and when I called my dad to share the news with him, that I was absolutely serving in medical missions. It was just in my backyard. It wasn't overseas. It wasn't in Africa solving and treating people for malaria as a nurse or a doctor. It was much different, but I was absolutely serving in medical missions to help women that were facing one of the biggest healthcare decisions of their lifetime when it comes to being able to protect the life that they carry inside them. So again, I didn't have a pro-life story necessarily in order to launch me into this. And you don't have to either. You just have to build the credibility by being here on a program like this today and also investing in the movement. And we can share more about that in a little bit.
I love that. I think that's so important for us to recognize that, sometimes we think coming into the movement, like you said, we have to have this big testimony, or we see superstars like former Planned Parenthood director Abby Johnson, and we think, oh, is there a place for me in all of this, right? But at the end of the day, this is a call from God. This is something that he puts on our heart, and life, our first gift, it's intrinsic to us all, I love that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead and jump us kind of right into all of the wealth of research that Vitae has, right? And how this is relevant for us. I'd love for you to take a moment to define right brain research. What is it? And then can you give us an overview of the research studies conducted by the Vitae Foundation? And again, what that means for all of us just in our daily lives as well.
I would love to. So right brain research is much different than what you might typically think about research. There's a science element to it and also an art element to it, because it's communication. It's understanding the emotions behind the decisions that people make. So a lot of times when people think research, they think about things like surveys and polling. They think about things that are quantitative. And again, it's a blend of those things, but it's unique and it's proprietary. It was developed by someone named Dr. Charles Kinney, a leading consumer psychologist. He's worked for Fortune 500 companies. In fact, you've probably been influenced by one or two or probably a dozen of his campaigns and his research along the way. Think about things like Coca-Cola, McDonald's, GM, Harley-Davidson. All of these brands have been influenced by right brain research. And really what they hope to accomplish is to help understand why, again, people make the decisions that they do, but also the feelings that they want to feel. The example I often give is that when you see Coca-Cola commercials, you don't see sad, thirsty people on the side of the road with their Coke, right? You see happiness. They even put that in bold words, right? You see happiness, you see joy, what they want you to feel by experiencing their product. So we have done 11 studies now over the course of 30 years, and they range from helping understand why women feel the way they do about the abortion decision, understanding the Planned Parenthood brand. This is a big one when we're talking about they understand that women want to feel in control of their situation. So that's why their branding looks so much different than what maybe our pregnancy center branding used to look like. And we've since shifted from that as a movement. But then also how to reach people with abortion healing resources who've maybe been a part of an abortion decision. So 11 studies that have ranged across several different topics that are related to abortion, but ultimately dive into why people do what they do And how can we utilize understanding that better to build strategies to connect with people on an emotional level and eliminate the barriers for why people don't choose life? We want them to be able to make life affirming decisions.
Yeah, so helpful. I know that we talk a lot about this in our training. It's so instructive. You know, the idea that the left brain is the logical side of our brain, the right brain is the emotional side of our brain. And when a woman is headed to the abortion facility, she's in right brain emotional mode, right? And she's even kind of lining up facts behind that. She's trying to reconcile present with future self and trying to see a vision forward for her life. And so a lot of times we know as pro-lifers, we're coming at this from a very left brain perspective, and rightly so in many respects, right? This is a baby with a heartbeat, so therefore you shouldn't take its life, right? But a woman in crisis mode, a woman in self-preservation mode often has, so much inverted, she's just trying to get out of her present perceived crisis, right? So she's in that emotional right brain crisis self-preservation mode. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what it looks like for us to meet her in that aptly?
Sure. When she's in the middle of that decision-making process, things that we might say to her, because again, many of us that are serving this movement are coming from a perspective where we've lived this our entire lives in this mindset of thinking that abortion is wrong.
Right.
And so we tend to come at it and need a paradigm shift to really be able to connect with her. So when we say things like choose life, and we have posters out there that say choose life, in her head, in that moment, she's thinking, whose life? Mine or the child that I'm carrying, right? Mm-hmm. Because in that moment, she's thinking, I will, if I choose to carry this child, if I choose this child's life, I have to give up my own. And so there's this self-preservation that she starts to battle. And so again, these are things that maybe we might not think about, but we're so used to just being like, oh, it just makes sense. Choose life, right? That seems straightforward enough. And we're also trying to create punchy signs for the sidewalk because we know that, we can only get 2 or 3 or 4 words on there, right? That she's going to be able to see. So we just need to think through that a little bit. Whenever she is in that mindset. Other things that are complete turnoffs to her are graphic images. I know for those of us that are like, well, it really reaches me if I see survivors of situations of, when I think about like Holocaust survivors, things like that makes a difference in me and it grabs my attention. But for her, she's in the moment of panic, and that actually pushes her, our studies have shown, closer to the Planned Parenthood brand, closer to the abortion clinic, because the abortion clinic has told her there are going to be protesters out there calling, even the kindest sidewalk advocates, but that they're going to be protesters out there, and they are going to call you names and yell at you and show you things that just aren't true. And so we are playing into that narrative if we are exposing her to that type of imagery, and our research has shown that's not effective. Other things are like religious references. Again, in our mindset, right, we're thinking like life is a gift from the Lord. How can you not see that? How can you not connect with that? That has to resonate. But in her moment, in her now moment, that does not connect with her. She feels shame from that. Yeah. And the abortion industry plays upon that. So those are the types of things that we need to keep in mind. We actually need to flip that upside down, and instead of talking about saving her baby and focusing on the baby and the graphic images and all of that, we have to talk with her about her. Yeah. That's the reality, right? And we call it a pro-woman approach at our organization, but basically it means woman-focused. And she needs to know that you are connecting with her and not looking past her and just looking at the child that she's carrying. That's the most important thing. And for a lot of women that are in that situation, they haven't even allowed themselves to connect with the concept of motherhood yet. That's a bridge too far for them. And again, so many of us might be sitting here and thinking, well, that's unheard of, Brandy. I can't understand that. We have to really, really think about, do we want to do what feels good and what's comfortable for us based upon what we've experienced in our own life experience? Or do we want to do what works? And I think that that's where we have to really challenge the way that we think about this situation and these issues.
It's so important. I know we talk in our training about the mom, baby, God paradigm, right? So we started sharing this in our trainings and on the sidewalk even before we knew about the Vitae research. And then it's helped us to kind of fill in the gaps and really explain this in a fuller way. But it's famous sidewalk counselor Karen Black, this beautiful Baptist woman from Georgia. She's now in Indiana as a grandmother, living out her life as a grandma. And I still remember going to her training and saying, hearing her say that, the right or the natural order is God, baby, mom. God's always first. A mother puts her child before herself, but a woman in crisis mode, a woman in self-preservation mode has all that inverted, right? And so just like Christ has met us in our great need, can we run to where she is, meet her where she's at? Like you said, talk about her. And then what we have found on the sidewalk is then her heart is more open to hearing about baby and even open to hearing about the gospel, right? But if we go right in with Jesus, if we go right in with a baby-oriented poster or message, then at least from what I've seen from the Vitae Foundation research, it's cognitive dissonance, right? That's the term that's used, I believe, right? Can you talk about that for a second, that cognitive dissonance, like how it doesn't compute when we go at somebody with a really heavy baby message initially?
Sure, and this actually goes for the general public as well. We've done some culture changing ads to be able to illustrate this, but really the basis of that is cognitive dissonance is this concept in psychology that your thoughts and feelings don't necessarily reconcile with your actions, and it creates this dissonance within you. And when you recognize that, you do have to figure out a way to be able to reconcile it or help that dissipate. So for example, people don't necessarily love to be told how to think, what to feel, what to do, right? That's just reality. That's just how this works. And even when you talk about educating people, I mean, for those of us that are eager to learn, great, education is fantastic. For those people that are in a situation where they're just trying to survive, they don't necessarily want to be educated, right? I know it seems like, again, what are we talking about here? We're kind of diving into words and semantics. Does it really matter? But it does, because if you can create some questioning within them, they can figure this out for themselves. For example, we just ran a national ad that talked about it actually showed a nurse that was, and you might have seen it on social media. I encourage you to go check it out if you haven't seen it. But it has a nurse that's walking out of the hospital or walking out from one of the delivery rooms and said, we worked really hard to save that preemie that came 3 months early, and we were able to do it. But where I struggle is how we're saving lives on this floor, and babies the exact same ages and sizes that are perfectly healthy, most are perfectly healthy, are being aborted, and their lives are being ended on another floor. How is that health care? Think about it.
Wow. Yeah.
So again, we're not telling people how to think or feel about the issue, but we are helping rise to the top that their thoughts and feelings about abortion might not reconcile with how they operate in their daily lives, maybe how they talk about the abortion issue, maybe the way that they are serving or not serving in the pro-life movement. And so if we can create more situations like that, even with women, and I know that it makes it a little bit more difficult because if you're serving as a sidewalk advocate, you might not always get a chance to engage in the conversation. It might just be a peaceful presence and being able to hold a sign. But the things that you need to make sure that you are equipped with is, again, focusing on her, and then what kind of resources are available to her to help her be able to really rewrite her life plan. We talk a lot about that so that she, again, can feel like she is in control of this situation. And this goes for the dad, too. And spoiler alert, I'll say this, we haven't announced this formally yet, but we're getting ready to do a men's study so that we can understand how to empower young men to be able to embrace life and encourage and support their partners, and to know how to communicate that to them. Because so many men have been told that the compassionate thing to do is to say, I'll support you no matter what you choose, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? That's not really a compassion, right? That's just what our culture has hit these young men with, when really if she wanted to have an abortion, she would have just gone to get it without him. She doesn't have to have him in this situation. She's only telling him because she's looking for him to say something more along the lines of, you know what? I don't necessarily know how we're going to do it, but I know we'll figure it out, and I'll help you be the best mom possible, and I'll be the best dad possible, and we will make it work. She's not necessarily looking for a commitment long term from him in that point, but definitely we'll figure this out on how we're going to be able to make a life-affirming decision. So our next research project will be about that, because we understand that that is something that sidewalk advocates could use as well, right? And just the pro-life movement can use in order to be able to communicate better about this issue. Because a lot of people, they say nothing because they don't know what to say. And in the absence of saying nothing, we know that the other side doesn't stop talking about this issue, right? And so they fill the void. And so that's, just going back to like what we can say, we're working on some additional things on what we can say. But we know right now for a woman who is in the middle of this crisis, talking to her about her and helping her understand and connect with the support system that are out there. And there are all kinds of them. Unfortunately, most women don't know that they're available.
Right. What I hear you saying, Brandy, is it's so important that we don't go at people, right? That it's an invitation, and we can even kind of set this up for them and invite them to think on a little bit of a deeper level, challenging them. And then it's also what we're not saying that's so powerful. When I'm out on the sidewalk and I say to a woman, free pregnancy tests, free sonogram, free options counseling, we're here for you. We can connect you with our women's center next door. I'm saying there's so much that I'm not saying that she's getting, which is, hey, I care about you. I'm here to help give you not a handout, but a hand up. We're going to walk with you. You have support, right? I'm coming at it from that emotional right brain perspective. And then all of a sudden, what we see on the sidewalk is that her heart is open to the greater conversation. And if I can get her away from the natural tension of the sidewalk in a pregnancy center, I get her in front of a sonogram, which is complementing that entire process. She's really, in a sense, evangelized through that entire process. And that heart is even ripe later for a gospel message, right? But it's so important that we understand this dynamic, that if we go at people from this really hard, logical left brain perspective, if we're shoving a sign in her face that's perceived as angry or ugly, right, then there's a decent chance we're going to lose her and hear nothing else that we have to say. But this mom, baby, God paradigm, I just love how it lines up so well with the Vitae Foundation research. It's like the key that unlocks the rest of the door. If she doesn't know that we care, she's not going to care to hear the rest of the message, right? So important. Let me ask you about this. This is one of the most interesting things that I found in the Vitae research. We know that when a woman is facing an unexpected pregnancy, at the very least legally, she has three options before her, right? She can choose to parent, she can choose abortion, or she can choose adoption. Per right brain research, it's so interesting to me that adoption is initially seen, at least initially seen, by mothers in crisis as the least desirable choice, when so many of us in the pro-life movement see that as potentially the savior, right? It's like mom gets the life that she wants, baby lives. Everybody wins, right? Why is it that so many of us, I have the sidewalk anecdote side of this, but why is it that so many of us hear initially, oh, I could never do that, right? It's actually seen as the least desirable of the three choices. So how can we help reframe this to her and then the culture at large and really show people the heroic choice that this is?
I love that you're asking this question. I will tell you, it's one of the more uncomfortable questions that we have to address within the movement, because so many people have these beautiful adoption stories, right? And they do see it as just being the answer. Right? Like if we could just convince these women, right, to choose adoption, then we would fix this.
That's right.
And it seems, again, from our mindset and our perspective, seems logical enough, right? I'm a very linear person, right? How do we get from point A to point B? All right, yep, that seems like it would work. But there are a lot of factors that maybe don't necessarily present themselves to typical pro-lifers that we have to dig in a little bit more to understand. And you've already talked about it. A little bit of it is the research. The research has clearly shown, and we had a study, and again, it's an uncomfortable title even. If you go and read any of our studies, which I encourage you to do, go to vitaefoundation.org. We have our studies will be available to you, and vitaeresearchinstitute.org. You can find that, our studies as well. They're titled things that will grab your attention and may make you shudder a little bit to be like, what is this? What is this? But it's normally a quote from a participant. The name of the study is called Abortion, the Least of the Three Evils. And you're thinking, whew, the least of the three evils. Even when you just quoted it, you talked about the least of the three choices, right? And I understand why. Because evil, because you wouldn't think that parenting would be evil and that adoption would be evil, because it's not. But that's how some of the participants in the study described it, because they are in their panicked mode. And that's the way that they're surviving right now. And they called it, they said, abortion seems like the least of the three evils. They feel like parenting is not an option for them. They feel like adoption is off of the table. I'll cover that more in a minute. And they feel like abortion is the only way to guarantee that their child will not be neglected or abused. And this is why they don't choose adoption. They are they're terrified about the outcome of what could potentially happen to their child. And I know it might seem really weird to think, so you're just going to end the child's life instead of what could happen. But in their moment of panic, that's exactly what they're doing. And perception is reality for them. And so we have to address that. And adoption is important. It is an important piece of how it's biblical. You see it. Adoption works, right? You saw Moses. It's this beautiful story that happened in the Bible. But we also have to understand that there are other variables that are impacting and influencing her situation. And when you are just trying to encourage her to jump right into adoption, just instead of abortion, and you pit those two things against each other, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work because of all those unknown fears that we just talked about. And so in order for us to frame this differently, I do have some really, really great friends that do it really well in the adoption world. And part of that is that they love on the birth mothers really well. If we want to change this, we have to stop seeing women that are potentially having abortions that are going to change and place their children for adoption. We have to change the way that we talk about this issue. Again, where some of us are still using words like give up for adoption, please give up that language, right?
Yes.
There's no one that is giving up their child. They're placing their child for adoption. And again, you might say, well, Brandy, that just seems like really choosy words, but it matters to her. It matters to her heart. And also with the birth mothers that are going through this, we need to be able to see them and help them achieve the healing that they need so they don't continue to put themselves in this situation. Because it's a lot deeper than just them showing up to an abortion clinic and being faced with the decision of abortion, parenting, or adoption. So in the adoption movement, also thinking about things like open adoption are great options, right? And again, birth mother healing and support are essential so that she feels like, again, you're talking to her about her, and you're not trying to use her as a commodity and a way to be able to gain a child that can bless your life. It's really important to reframe that.
So important. And again, I know that this may be cringe for so many people that are listening to this, right? Like we're adopted sons and daughters of God. Like this is, this is so after God's own heart. But I think that if we're going to love well, we have to first understand. Even if we don't initially understand, we have to try to understand. And I think the thing that really helped me to understand this when I was looking at the Vitae Foundation research is the idea that abortion presents a sort of finality, right? With adoption, I remember reading that it's actually that she goes through two deaths, right? The death first of her present identity. She has to surrender to being a mother. And then she looks at it and says, wow, now I got to bond with this child for 9 months in my womb and then quote unquote, give it up. Right. So what we do on the sidewalk is we will say, what have you heard about the opportunity of open adoption? Did you know that you're in the driver's seat? Do you know that you get to choose the family and situation that you want? Did you realize that you're part of the extended family? Right. And so we start painting a picture of how that speaks to her need to be in the driver's seat, right?
Love it. Control. Again, control. Yes. She needs to feel that control piece that oftentimes she's not getting when she's feeling out of control with the situation. She's trying to regain control. That's why she's considering abortion, right? So if you can present it like that, that is a phenomenal way of being able to help her regain that control in her life and still choose a life for her child.
And think about, too, how Planned Parenthood so surreptitiously sneaks into this crisis. The enemy is twisting things like the beauty of adoption and her situation. You know, he's throwing up all these obstacles in her life and saying, you have to have this abortion because of X going on, right? And then you got Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry coming in and saying, $500, nobody has to know. It's not really a baby yet, right? And we think, again, that sometimes if we go at this from a left brain perspective, we're going to win an argument. She's going to choose life and change the direction of her life, right? But again, just like you're saying so well, first understanding her heart, understanding the crisis, understanding how the enemy has twisted all of this. I often find on the sidewalk that I'm doing a lot of untwisting, right? That I'm kind of reframing all this for her, that I'm showing her the possibilities, the hope that we have in Christ going forward,
Hopeful.
right?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
Hopeful. And I know that you guys have seen that a lot in your research, that even when you've put together ads and, TV advertisements and things like this, that you guys have literally looked at, again, what is the vision forward, right? Just like you said, Coca-Cola is not selling just, hey, this is a great drink and you're thirsty and you're miserable until you drink Coca-Cola. It's, share the happiness, right? Isn't that the tagline? Share the happiness, right? So we're giving her a vision of what's possible. Of course, we're doing that with God's grace and with the help of Christ in our midst, right? But giving her a new vision for what's possible. Without a vision, the people perish, right?
Yeah,
So important.
exactly. Hopeful and non-judgmental. And one other small thing that I would encourage you with, because bringing that hope on a regular basis, like, yes, God can carry us through. We can wake up with a positive, persevering spirit, come out and take care of what needs to happen to be able to protect these women and these babies and these families. But there will be a time that you will maybe feel a little crispy, a little burnout, right? Because this work is hard. It is really hard. And I would just encourage you to have good people in your life that are your accountability checkpoints that can tap you and say, you know what? I think maybe you should take a break, a breather, right? Because otherwise we'll never finish this to-do list of saving women and babies and families from abortion. Until abortion is no longer a perceived need by a woman, we will never finish the to-do list. The sidewalks will always need people on them. We're going to have to go out and serve and serve and serve day in and day out. But I will caution you, because the compassion that we show is the key into how to serve the women and the men as well that we are trying to reach. So please just make sure that is something that you keep in mind, is that there will be times you need to take a break, because this work is really, really heavy and it's really hard.
I think somebody probably needed to hear that today, and sometimes we have to take a step back and recognize that we are not the savior, that somebody already saved the world. It's not us, right? And until Jesus comes back, we're going to be kind of, dealing with, seeing the brokenness of humanity at times. But I know it just lights me up so much to be able to give people the hope that God has given me in Christ, right? We have such an opportunity here. And again, having this research now to back us up as we are all seeking to be the hands and feet of Jesus, it really is so powerful. Brandy, we've got a minute left. I'd love for you to answer this question. This pretty big, deep question. Maybe this is a whole other show, right? How do you think, like, knowing Vitae's research, which again is just life-changing, it's been life-changing for me in my ministry and so many others, how do you think we can win the world with the message of life and transform culture? What do you think is the key or the keys to being able to reach hearts and minds and bring people from pro-abortion to pro-life?
So I think it goes back to what we were kind of hinting at earlier. Do we want to do what feels good, what's natural to us, or do we want to do what works? And I think that as we understand the emotional motivators behind why people do what they do, we have the opportunity to be able to work together to save more lives and to really open up people's eyes with cognitive dissonance to understand maybe why their thoughts and feelings don't necessarily reconcile with their behavior. And that comes to the surface. And so I think we have to challenge ourselves to get uncomfortable, to have the uncomfortable conversations, to do the work to understand how to communicate better about this issue, instead of just saying, I don't really have the opportunity to do that. We have to make the spaces to do it. If the opportunities aren't coming up naturally, We have to create those opportunities, but we need to do the work first to understand the best ways to be able to do it, right? You
Yeah.
don't have to be a scholar in it. You do not have to have your PhD in research to understand the research. We do have ways, if you go to vitaeresearchinstitute.org, we have simple ways to be able to, we have these, so we have these lovely guidebooks that are available for pastors and policymakers and pregnancy centers and medical professionals. And we're even developing stuff just for everyday people. You can also nominate your pastor to be able to receive a pro-life care packet that has some of these guidebooks in it so that they know how to communicate about the issue. The truth of the matter is, if we keep doing what we've been doing, like I said earlier, we're going to keep getting what we've been getting. And if we want to change, we have to dig in and do the work and then carry the message forward. Because who else is going to do it, Lauren? Right?
Yeah.
And support organizations like the two of ours that are saying, you know what? We're going to find new ways to solve some of these older issues, right? And we are here for it because we have the tools to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just what love does. Love runs to meet the other person where they're at, to understand them. And empathy doesn't mean that we agree all the time, right? It
Right.
means that we just want to understand someone's heart and where they're at. And then I have found that when you can meet someone in their crisis and they really feel like you're sitting there with them for a moment, then you can start loving them into a new way, into a decision for life, right?
And that's what Jesus did, right? Jesus
Right.
did that. Like, he met physical needs first before he had people following him, right? And I think that, again, like when we're talking about the order of all of this, like, we have the best example possible that sits right in front of us. We shouldn't ignore that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to speak for a minute to those of you who, this is a new concept. Maybe you're wrestling with it, and maybe you have been going out to the abortion facility. You're maybe not with Sidewalk Advocates for Life, but you're with another ministry where you go out and you hold an abortion victim photo or something related to that. And first of all, I just want to thank you for your passion. And I've often told people, like, I'm not against abortion victim photos in every instance. I like them best in an educational setting where there's a chance for dialogue. And if you can find a creative way to solicit consent, even better, right? If we're in that left brain mode, that's our audience, right? I have a friend that changed her mind at a Scott Klusendorf talk because, she risked looking at this graphic image video, this kind of video montage of preborn children that had lost their lives to abortion. It was powerful for her. So again, don't hear what we're not saying. We're just saying in front of an abortion facility, right as women are going in, they're in that right brain emotional mode. So can we love enough to kind of put away what we want to work, what we think might work, and instead really step into the fullness of what it means to meet someone else where they're at and get them to the result. I mean, I know that we know that the most important thing is bringing people to Jesus Christ, right? But if I go in and say, do you know Jesus, right? It's not going to compute. She's not there. She's in the burning building. I got to run in and get her out of the burning building first, and then her heart is open to the greater message. And so anyways, I just want to encourage all of you, like, if you're wrestling with this, you're starting to wrestle with this, you're, kind of in the middle of your journey, or trained sidewalk advocate, you want to learn more, again, go to vitaefoundation.org and you can dive into more of this research. It's been so fascinating. So Brandy, thank you for being with us. Any closing thoughts before we close out the show today?
I would also just encourage you to think about what we call the equation for life. And in order to reach her, you need to speak to her identity. We've talked about that a little bit, and help her identify or introduce the support in her life that will empower her to carry to term. That is the winning strategy. Again, connect with her, help her connect with the resources, and you will see that more than often, right, she will end up choosing life. She will make a life-affirming decision. That's the key. And compassion. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you for just your support of the research, and also for talking about the hard things. And I also want to echo everything that you just said about the victim imagery as well, right? Like, don't hear what we're not saying, but understand that there are certain times and situations where it's vital for us just to be really really respectful of people's perspective, because in their panic, their perspective is absolutely reality for them. That's what we're facing.
That's right. We want to reach them. And I no one did this, like you said, better than our Lord. I mean, God himself becoming man, right? Becoming one of us, meeting us in our crisis, and something that we couldn't solve for ourselves. And walking that out and showing us how to walk home to heaven, right? How to go home to heaven. And so again, if nothing else, take that as your inspiration, right? And we're all still learning together. And I know that there's going to be more research studies coming out. So I hope you all will continue to follow Brandy and the Vitae Foundation as they continue to develop this body of research. So important. Thank you so much, Brandy. We love you. We appreciate you. And we're going to be cheering y'all on at the Vitae Foundation. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Keep up the great work. Appreciate you.
Thank you. So good. All right. Well, a closing thought. One of the things that hit me early in my sidewalk advocacy ministry at one point is that love beckons us. It calls us out of ourselves to understand and serve the other, even if where they are may not make sense to us. 1 Corinthians 13 gives a moving description of what love is and what it's not. Paul tells us that love is patient. It's not rude. It's not envious or boastful. It's not proud. It doesn't dishonor others. And then what's interesting is the next descriptor in the passage is self-seeking. So love is not self-seeking. In other words, perfect love calls us to put aside self-interest or what we think might work to meet the other person where they're at, just as Christ has met us in our great need. Now, here's the tricky part. Later in the passage, it also says that true love rejoices with the truth. So how do you meet someone where they're at, especially if their thinking is off so much that they, for example, want to take the life of their child and still hold the line at what is good, right, and true? I think this is the beautiful balance that we can have as believers. We might use her language, relate to her, serve her, care for her in the human experience, but also admonish her that abortion won't really get her what she, in the depths of her heart, really wants and desires. We care enough to tell her that it will hurt her and her family. And with anyone in our lives, we want to love them enough to give them not the counterfeit, but the truth, the real answer that will set them free. Abortion is the great mirage, the great counterfeit. We know that so many things in life can look like the answer until one day we wake up and see that it was a great lie, that it was something that caused confusion and great pain. So yes, let's run to meet others where they are with great compassion, kindness, and grace, just as Christ has given that to us. But let's also love enough to give people what is true, good, and right. It's the only thing that ultimately will set them and us free. With that, thank you again so much for joining me for another episode of the Lauren Muzyka Show. We'll be back here next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central on Facebook Live, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Thanks so much, everybody.